Husband's been secretly taking lessons to start a new life in another country with a woman he's been seeing, and I only figured it out because a receipt fell out of his coat pocket at the worst possible moment. Hi, I'm Myra, I'm 31. I teach high school English, which basically means my job is to notice patterns in people and in sentences. And somehow I missed the pattern in my own house until the evidence literally slid across our kitchen tiles like a guilty little fish. It was a Tuesday night, the kind that feels like the inside of a gray sock. I'd just finished a marathon of grading essays about The Tempest. Every teenager thinks Caliban deserves a redemption arc, and frankly I agree. And I was reheating leftover lentil soup when the dryer buzzed and my husband, Theo, drifted in looking like an unmade bed disguised as a handsome man. He dropped his coat over the back of a chair. He always does that. It's our dullest ongoing fight. And a slip of paper fluttered out, skidded under the table, and stopped against my foot. Reflex made me pick it up before my better angel could say privacy, because better angels don't pay my rent. It was a receipt for Unterricht German 4 lesson. Language school. 2 weeks earlier. Paid in cash. Below that, a neat little stamp, Goethe Zentrum. 8-minute private session. The teacher's name had a tiny umlaut in it, like an eyebrow raised at me. I put the pot back on the stove without turning on the flame because suddenly I was all flame. You're learning German, I said, and the words came out like they'd been taught in a hurry. He laughed, startled. What? No. Why? I held the receipt up between 2 fingers like a fishhook. It swung, he stared. The kitchen did that thing kitchens do in bad moments where every sound becomes a witness. A droplet from the tap. The hum of the fridge. Somewhere in the courtyard, someone dragged a chair. Theo's mouth did not invent a new answer. It just forgot how to move. Ah, he said finally, which is a vowel people make when a plan melts in their hand. It's not okay, yeah. I've been taking a few classes. For what? I said, and I heard myself go very calm in the way teachers go calm when a student calls Macbeth boring. A trip? A hobby? A midlife romance with umlauts? His eyes flicked to the coat, to the door, to the coat again, like it might grow a solution. For work. Opportunities in Berlin. You know how my company's. Your company is not in Berlin, I said, because I may not speak German, but I'm fluent in my husband's resume. Also, you hate sauerkraut. The only thing you know about Germany is that soccer happens there. And beers. And pretzels. He chuckled then, the wrong chuckle, the one that says let's be adorable so you don't notice the stove is on. I've learned that sound. It's the sound of a toddler hiding behind his own hands. Here's something I've discovered about myself. When the ground keels under me, I hold on to dumb details like railings. The spoon on the stove. The way my sock had a hole in the big toe. The taste of toothpaste still ghosting my mouth. How long have you been taking lessons? I asked. And how long have you been lying about where you go on Wednesdays at 6? He rubbed his jaw with his knuckle, a tick like erasing a chalkboard. A few months, he said. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal, I repeated, and the phrase was so ridiculous it put energy back in my legs. You don't speak my language when you text me from the grocery store, but you're taking private classes for another language in a city we don't live in. What's the small deal then? Conjugations. Theo is a decent man who's been practicing a non-decent thing. I could see the decency fighting its way to the surface, gasping. He made a little surrender gesture with his hands and said, Okay. There's more. Can we sit? We Saturday. The soup did not simmer, the moment did. I met someone, he said, and I think I knew those words were coming because my spine braced itself, but my mouth still felt like biting tinfoil. Her name is Eva. She's from Germany. We met at the climbing gym. She's leaving in 6 months. I thought. I don't know what I thought. That I could learn enough to be with her there. Or at least have the option. Option, I said. Like I'm a cable plan. He flinched. I know. I hate how that sounds. It sounds accurate, I said. And also small. Here's where I confess a cliché. I did not immediately explode. I did not throw the soup. I did not hell a plate like a Greek wedding gone rogue. I asked teaching questions. When did you meet? How often? What is her last name? How did you imagine telling me? Did you imagine telling me? Why German, why not simply goodbye? He answered like a student who didn't do the reading but really likes me and hopes that counts. They met in late spring. He liked that she read paper maps and put her phone away. They'd had coffee, then hikes, then a we didn't mean for this to happen that I'm sure felt beautiful in the moment and shabby in the light. He hadn't imagined telling me. He'd imagined deciding, then confessing like a weather report. He called it complicated. I called it cowardly. I don't say that to be righteous, I say it to be clear. The next morning I brushed my teeth while Googling Goethe Zentrum on my phone. Don't judge me. There are people who take up boxing, I take up information. The school was very real and very 5 blocks from our apartment. You know those moments in city life where you realize the secret thing is not in a far-off tower but right around the corner and it makes your bones feel transparent? That. I walked to work along the route he'd have taken on Wednesdays and it made me sick how sweet it was. A bakery that sells Berliner Pfannkuchen. A shop window with a little stein shaped like a boot. I imagined him leaving class with his notebook full of articles and cases, buying a pastry, feeling his life branching into 2 languages. Then I imagined myself doing laundry, grading essays, cooking soup. Every marriage has 2 calendars. I just hadn't realized mine had been translated. My students took one look at me and behaved like saints, which is how I know I was pale as printer paper. Not one of them tried to get away with AirPods. I assigned a silent reading block and read their faces the way I read novels, looking for themes. Adolescents are brutal and loyal, they could smell something. One girl slipped me a note on her way out that said, "Drink water. It helps." I poured a glass and pretended it did. Sometimes pretending is the bridge you need to cross. That evening, Theo came home with his hands up like a man entering a cathedral he'd graffitied. He said he'd booked a session with a couples therapist. I said okay because yes is sometimes a placeholder for a better word. We went. The therapist, a woman with kind elbows and unfazed eyes, opened with, "What is the hope?" I said, "To not throw soup." Theo said, "To be honest, finally." She nodded like both were sacred. We drew a timeline on a legal pad. We labeled it in 2 colors, mine for what I knew, his for what he did. Watching those colors diverge and then cross felt like looking down at your chest and seeing you've been wearing 2 different shoes for a year. I don't recommend it, but if it happens, at least you can point and say, that's why I've been walking funny. Why the lessons? The therapist asked him. What did the language give you? A head start, he said, and then he pressed a fist to his mouth like he wanted to put those words back. And also a feeling of being brave. You know bravery is telling the truth to someone who thinks you're safe, I said, and I didn't plan to sound that teachily. It just came out. He looked at his knees. The therapist underlined something, her pen made a friendly squeak. In the days that followed, our home turned into a messy classroom. We made rules and unmade them. He slept on the couch. I watched German vocabulary flashcards add their little rectangles to our coffee table like they'd paid rent. When he wasn't home one afternoon, I picked up a card at random. Fernweh, it said on one side, on the other an ache for the distant, a longing to be elsewhere. I wanted to snap the card in half and then I wanted to memorize it. I put it back. I drank water. It helped, but only like an umbrella helps in a hurricane, symbolically. People ask me with their eyes if not their mouths why I didn't immediately leave. It's a fair question. The truest answer is not romantic. My nervous system needed a slower off-ramp than my pride. There is also this. The woman in me who loved him wanted to see if the man in him could do the work that love requires. And the teacher in me wanted a report card. I asked for every schedule, every receipt, every password. He handed them over without bargaining, and if you've ever watched a man hand over the keys to his fantasy, you know it's not sexy, but it is instructive. Among the emails was a Gmail draft folder with a bunch of half-written messages addressed to nobody. In them he'd been practicing breakups with me, with Eva, with himself. "I'm leaving because I need to know who I am," one began. I shook my head. "You can't self-discover by cutting the person who holds your mirror. The mirror breaks. You see yourself in shards." I did not meet Eva. I did not stalk her Instagram. I did scroll past her in my mind daily like a crossword clue I couldn't fill. Everything I put in that blank letter wasn't satisfying. Was she a villain? Maybe. Was she lonely? Maybe. Was she none of my business? Mostly. It helped to think of her as a country he wanted to visit because it promised him a version of himself without overdue library books and compost bins. I know that country. I want to visit it sometimes. It doesn't exist. There are only different compost bins. One night, I asked him to bring the German notebook to the table. He did, meek as a boy with his times tables. We went through the pages line by line. I know, this sounds like emotional waterboarding. But listen, sometimes you need to unpack the suitcase to see if anything in it belongs to you. He'd written whole sentences, ich Haybangst. I'm afraid. Ich will es richtig machen. I want to do it right. In the margin, a doodle of a little house with smoke and a sun like a child's. And then underlined twice Entscheidung. Decision. Have you made one? I asked. He looked like a man who woke up in a boat in fog and finally sees the shore. I want to stay, he said. I want to stay and do whatever it takes to deserve staying. I didn't hand him a medal. Staying is the entry fee, I said. Owning staying is the concert. We made a plan the way people make new budgets after a financial scare. It was not romantic, which is how you know it had a chance. He would stop the lessons. He would send a message to Eva, not a poem but a door closing. He would tell a friend, not to recruit allies but to make truth social. He would find a therapist on his own to ask the questions that had nothing to do with me. Why the itch for elsewhere, why he mistook secrecy for bravery, why he thought future him would be built out of cleaner adjectives. And me? I would decide week by week, then month by month. It turns out marriage vows don't forbid punctuation. You can insert commas where you thought there were only periods. The message to Eva was 3 sentences long and no more. I have been wrong. I have been weak. I am ending this now. I asked to see it before he sent it, not because I wanted to do surveillance but because my heart deserved a seat at the table where it had been eaten. He sent it. She did not reply. Maybe she took her phone away and put it somewhere safe. Maybe she crushed it like a bug. Maybe she went to a lesson and learned the word for regret. I let the maybe be. He stopped lessons the next day. A week later, I walked past the Goethezentrum and saw a new cohort of students clustered under the awning, laughing over coffee, their notebooks scabbed with stickers, and I felt a little sneer and then a little softness. I do not own language or longing. I do, however, own my boundaries. I kept walking. We did not tell everyone the whole story. We gave people the PG edit or the director's cut depending on their capacity. My sister wanted the whole screenplay and a spreadsheet of motives. She made me lasagna and swore at him in 3 languages she does not speak, which is a family talent. My father said quietly, "People don't go to new countries to become new. They go to see their same shadow on different cobblestones." He would know. He emigrated twice and still chooses the same kind of chair in every apartment he's had. The first time Theo reached for me after all that, we were folding laundry. His hand hovered like a drone seeking permission to land. I nodded without looking up. He placed his palm on my shoulder and my skin did not leap. It shivered, then settled. "Listen, I won't sell you a fairy tale. Some nights I rolled away from him because my ribcage wanted space. Some mornings I watched him sleep and followed a crack in the ceiling and imagined a life where I lived alone and canvases leaned against walls and nobody's coat ever touched the back of a chair. Both lives had weather. Both had rent. Both had dishes. Realizing that didn't make the decision easy, but it made it honest. Month 3, we put actual language lessons on our calendar, not German. Us. We picked a night each week and sat at the table with a timer and a deck of cards I made out of index cards like a nerd. On each a sentence stem. I felt small when I wanted to tell you that. I lied to myself when I said we took turns drawing and finishing. Sometimes we laughed because intimacy is weird. Sometimes one of us cried and the other watched the timer and did not interrupt. After, we ate something buttery, croissants, cookies, the myth of comfort, and I slept a little deeper. One afternoon, I dug in my tote bag and found the original receipt that started all this. I'd shoved it inside the cover of a novel and forgotten it. For a wild minute, I thought about dropping it back into his coat pocket like a ghost. Instead, I pinned it to the corkboard in my little study with a note below in my messy teacher handwriting, evidence not equal to ending. It can also be beginning. When students came over for extra help, they always got nosy about my board. "What's that?" a boy asked, pointing. "A metaphor," I said, and he smirked like he'd caught me teaching again. Do I forgive him? Most days, in doses. Forgiveness, I'm learning, is like learning a language properly. You don't memorize it once. You practice in public, you fumble, you get corrected, you go home and you do your exercises. I don't romanticize the work. I also don't minimize it. We put a jar on the counter labeled Miles, and every time one of us did something that moved us an inch toward us, shared an unflattering truth, asked for a hug instead of sulking, apologized without a thesis statement, we dropped a coin in. When the jar got heavy, we took the coins and bought train tickets to a town an hour away where nobody knew us, and we walked in the rain and ate soup that wasn't ours and forgot for 3 hours to speak in italics. Once, on a Sunday morning, the word Fernway floated into my head again and annoyed me. I looked it up properly, not on flashcards but in an essay by a travel writer. "It is the grief of a mapless ache," she wrote. I underlined that. I showed Theo. He nodded and said, "I thought it was a compass." It was a fever. There are answers you get in therapy and answers you get at a bus stop when nobody else is around and the wind is gentle. This felt like the second kind. We are not saints. We say dumb things. Last week he called Berlin the B word just to make me laugh, and I did against my will because jokes are little treaties. I still keep a file on my desktop called Contingency where I've listed what I'd do if leaving became the right verb, where I'd stay first, which friend would bring me boxes, what I'd tell the landlord, which playlists would not kill me. I am allowed to be prepared for the life I hope I won't need. Knowing I can live without him is the only reason I can live with him with any grace. When people ask about us, I say we're in active repair. I say we're building a house after a fire with the same wood but different hands. I say the receipts live in a folder labeled curriculum, because I teach for a living and I know that the units that hurt the most are the ones students remember 10 years later, even if they swear they hated them. And sometimes when a student writes a sentence that knocks me sideways, something raw and unpolished and so alive I want to steal it, I think maybe this is the good kind of Fernway, the ache that doesn't make you run, the ache that makes you reach. I go home and I put that feeling on our table with the salt and pepper and I tell Theo about it, and he tells me about the man on the train who fixed a stranger's broken suitcase with a shoelace, and we stack these small accounts of bravery like kindling. Husband's been secretly taking lessons to start a new life in another country with a woman he's been seeing, and that sentence used to be the whole story. Now it's just the first paragraph of a longer one where two people learn the grammar of admitting they're not who they thought and decide to conjugate anyway. I won't tie it up with a bow you can buy at the airport. But here's what I can offer. There is a receipt on my corkboard that once made my knees go watery, and today I looked at it, squinted, and then pinned another scrap above it, a ticket stub from the local theater, date night last Friday, a play neither of us understood but both of us were brave enough to say we didn't love. We walked home holding hands, not like a movie, like people who know the distance between their fingers is a choice. Tonight, I'm making soup again. Tomato this time, the easy, honest kind. He comes in, hangs his coat on the hook without my asking, puts his phone face up on the counter, small lit rectangle saying nothing, and he kisses my neck and I feel my body measure the kiss against a million tiny scales and then set the weights down. "How was your day?" he asks, and I tell him about Caliban and redemption arcs and a girl who slipped me a note that said, "Drink water. It helps." He pours us both a glass. It does.